I was debating telling them my story, but I'm sure they've all heard it 100 times.
I know I've heard it enough. I'm not going to miss it.
Okay. Fine.
We're old. We'll have forgotten what you said before. So.
Well, I have another one that maybe I'll tell you this one. This is just to kind of get you guys warmed up and awake. I've been in the RV industry all my life, and when my kids were really, really young, we had decided we wanted to try camping. And I had an opportunity to buy a old Bounder motorhome really cheap, if you know what I mean. It was an '89, and for those of us that have been in it forever, that was the last year that Ford was using their Class C chassis for Bounders, and it just the stupidest thing they ever did, but we didn't know. So anyway, I got this Bounder, and we're going over to Hermiston to visit my cousin who grows watermelons, and we're going down the road, down the hill into Hood River, and I'm driving cautiously, doing about 50, 55, and this little girl goes flying by in this Pinto blue, and probably doing 70, and she notices in front of me over here there's a dog coming across the freeway, so she immediately throws it over in the slow lane and locks it up. And so here I'm, both hands on the wheel, pulling as hard as I can, pushing both feet on the pedal, got a transmission shift down to first gear. These old Class C chassis did not have the best brakes. And so we're coming up on this Pinto hard. Her boyfriend, who was in the passenger seat, turns around and is looking at me. His eyes are like, anyway, she never realized what she's doing, and we just, right up to, didn't quite hit her, and then she took off. And that was the end of owning a motorhome. We went from a tent trailer, we tried that, then we went to a fifth wheel. Anyway, well, good morning, everybody. That's my worthless story. Got you going. My name is Dan. I work at Guaranty. Obviously, I've been here a long time. Kind of the weekend guy working this building. This is Dave Taylor. He is our service manager at First Street, one of the wisest people in the company. We are here to give you information. We're not here to sell you anything. We're here to just share with you what we know. This is driven by questions from you folks and kind of a loose agenda. If you've heard it before, just ask different questions and we'll go in a different direction. Having said that, I want to introduce you again to Dave Taylor. He's going to take it over for a few minutes, and we're going to get into this.
Good morning. This is notoriously one of our shorter classes, seminars. It's all about electrical. If we confuse you, slow us down, back us up. We'll repeat ourselves, explain. Sometimes we've been doing this so long, we see it every day. So slow us down if you don't understand something. Ask questions. We don't mind. That's why I'm standing here. So first I want to see, does anybody out here have a Highline motor home? Diesel, pusher, 38, 40 foot? Well, that's going to help. Anybody out here that you know of have an inverter instead of a converter? Does everybody know the difference? Let's start with that.
There will be a test, so yes, take notes.
Hope you got more pen. You're going to need it.
If you don't pass the test, you have to pay for the course.
Okay, an inverter, which we find in some of the smaller B-class and Highlines, takes 12 volt out of your batteries and inverts it to 110 volts. Main reasoning is so that if you're parked in your kid's driveway at midnight and decide to get up and watch a movie or warm up a Hot Pocket, you don't have to start your generator. And of course their driveway wasn't built for your 45-foot Highline motorhome, so they don't have a plug-in for you to use, which is fine. Your unit's okay to dry camp, but you need a little 110 comfort power is what I like to call it, or emergency power. You can't start your generator at midnight. Neighbor's going to get mad. You'll wake the kids up. So what you'll do is, usually these will have an inverter with an inverter switch. Like I say, again, it inverts from 12 volt to 110. You'll flip on your inverter switch, and usually there's a microwave, the entertainment center, and usually one plug in the bathroom or bedroom to run CPAP, alarm clock, something like that. It's not meant to use all night long. You don't want to bake a chicken in your convection oven using an inverter. Due to it pulling 110 volts out of your 12 volt batteries, you're going DC to AC. You're pulling a huge amount of amps out of your batteries. So it's emergency use only. We do have customers that come in and want several inverters installed with a whole roof full of solar panels and a bay full of batteries. Yes, they have more options. They can go longer. But a normal inverter install in an RV of any type is comfort power only for a short time. Now, most everybody out here is going to have what they call a converter, which does the opposite. It takes 110 volts, converts it to 12 volts. That's why the majority of everything in your motorhome, even a Highline, the majority of the lighting, the refrigerators, water heaters, just about everything requires 12 volts to operate your RV. So when I say converter, there's two different types. There's a freestanding, which is like this. It basically goes in line, and I'm going to draw pictures here in a little bit. I'm pretty good at doing that. And then you have what we call a lower unit converter. A lower unit converter is real popular in, excuse me, midline RVs. You'll know you have it when you open up a little there's a brown door under your refrigerator or under your dinette. You open it, and there's about 20 fuses that go along there. And there's an area underneath it that you can't see. That's called the lower unit converter. This is a freestanding, and I'll go into the difference on those here in a little bit when I start drawing out diagrams. So, inverter, converter, two different things. We got those now? Excellent. Okay, so the first thing you're going to do when you come to pick your unit up, sorry, messing with your solar panels. He's the solar panel man. I let him talk about that. Your unit will be plugged in when we give you a walkthrough. You're going to take it home and plug it in somewhere, hopefully to store it, or when you go camping, you're going to plug it in using what we call a shore cord. These were actually introduced on boats. That's why people ask, why are they called a shore cord? This is a 30 amp, 3 connections. A 50 amp is about 3 times as big as this, and you can't hold it up like this with one hand. I could have when I was younger, but not anymore. It's gonna have, that's a little shorty though, but yeah, it's bigger around. So you're gonna plug your unit in. When you plug your unit into that post out at the campground, that cord is going to go right up into your RV. If you have a generator, more than likely the first stop this is going to make is at a transfer switch. It's going to have 2 relays in it. The reason for this transfer switch, this shore cord is going to come in here. Your generator that's located on your unit is going to come in the other side. The reason for that transfer switch is to tell which power you're asking for. If you plug in, this relay sees that you've plugged in. It has a timer in it. It transfers, clicks over this relay, sends power out. If you turn your generator on, this relay sees power. It times, sends power out. If you have the generator and plugged in at the same time, it will not see both. It will see both. It will automatically drop to your shore power. So running your generator with your shore power on does absolutely no good but waste your fuel. When this comes out of this transfer switch, the next location it's going to go to is your breaker panel. And the breaker panels look different depending on what unit you have. The breakers look the same. You're going to have those big clunky on and off breakers. From there, if you have a standalone, these breakers are going to power your roof AC. They're going to go out to your receptacles. They're going to go to your electric water heater, electric part of your fridge. Basically, it branches out like a big tree. One of these breakers, if you have a freestanding, is going to say CONV right underneath it. And what they've done is they take a 110-volt wire off of that breaker panel over here for your converter to plug into. Going the wrong direction there. That's a receptacle. Okay, we good so far? So this is laying usually underneath. Usually you can hear these on a quiet night because they have computer fans on them. And you'll hear them, they make a little noise. So I always tell everybody, if you're looking for your converter, turn every light in the place on, turn the radio and TV off, and just stand there. Because within about 10 minutes, you're going to hear your converter amping up in charge to try to charge your batteries. So now you have this converter plugged in here. This converter then sends out 12 volt positive and 12 volt negative to your fuse panel where your 12 volt fuses are. So that supplies your little red, blue, green, and yellow fuses. Now, one of these fuses, since we had one here and 110 that went over to here, one of these fuses, or two, is going to be 30 or 40 amp fuses, and they're going to say converter. Sometimes the better models actually have the fuse located in the converter. These converter fuses are going to power up this panel of fuses, and each one of these fuses is going to say living room lights, slide out, jacks, toilet, whatever its main purpose is, it will list. That doesn't mean if your radio goes out that it may not be on the one with the toilet. They can't list everything in this box. So you run this huge loop, depending if you have a converter and an inverter. Then you're going to have these two here, the 30s and 40s, go back out to your battery. So not only is your converter supplying house power that you're currently using, it's supplying battery charge. Now the power you're getting, it will come up, charge, and then come back through to run your lights. That's what we call clean power. Believe it or not, if you're plugged in, you can take the battery off the front of your trailer or out of your motorhome. You can take that battery and all those wires out, plug your unit in, and that converter would supply enough reasonably to run your lights. We get a lot of people that say my lights are bright, but a lot of my other stuff isn't working. That's because you're getting a charge from your converter, so you have enough for lights. As soon as you start putting that converter through without having a backup battery to assist with amp draws, this converter will start to fail in giving you enough voltage. So if you start running heavy stuff like refrigerators, slide rooms, this converter will just fall on its face because it's not meant for huge power, huge volts. It's meant for amps for charging. So that's usually when we tell people, check your fuses either on the converter or in the panel, make sure they haven't blown. then we'll tell you go out and unplug your trailer and see if you still have 12 volts. And the majority of the time people come in and say, no, as soon as I unplug, the lights go out. Then we know we've had a failure somewhere between the converter and the batteries. It's one of the easier, it sounds really complicated. Once you've been doing this a couple of years, the technicians find that this is one of the easiest systems to diagnose out there. As long as we can get to your transfer switch, everything's huge benefit for you. When you bring your trailer in or fifth wheel in to have us work on it, take the 14 camping chairs, the fire poker, the 12 pieces of firewood, the Duralog, and the tent out of the front compartment. Because as soon as that guy opens it, the first thing he does is go, ah. So we have to unload it and load it. So, yeah.
Lived in RVs now for 7 years, and my converter never made a noise. Okay, but I got this new RV from Guaranty, and the converter hums whenever there's load rock to it. And I'm not running anything extra right now, just what's on the RV.
Okay, so his question is, basically your older converter didn't hum.
Never hums. The new one hums, and when I turn the lights on in the living room, it hums louder. And lights in the kitchen hums even louder.
Great, that means it's working great.
Is that normal?
It is. His question is, his older converter didn't. Yours, what year was your older unit?
06.
Okay. Still should have had a 3 or 4 phase converter, but depending on the location and how good your hearing is, I can walk in just about anything and tell you where it is within 15 minutes. The older converters were a single, what am I trying to say? The old bricks that just charged at one rate. They didn't ramp up. The new converters have 3 or 4 charge rates so that they don't overcharge your single step. Now we have 3 and 4. The charge wizard's great. The newer converters, depending on your usage, will ramp up. If you don't need a lot, it will charge real slow. If you have all the grandkids in there and you have everything on in the world, then they'll come right up and they'll get pretty loud. The older converters, really they had a heat sink in them, which was a heat sink is basically a piece of metal they put across the top with all these fins on it. And the only cooling it needed was the air that went across these heat sinks. The newer ones, just about the whole side of it is heat sinks, and then they run a fan through it. So as this amps up, that fan will increase speed to cool those heat sinks. So the older ones really didn't make a lot of noise. The newer ones, you'll hear them. Usually not so much at night because that's when you have everything off. They just kind of have a little steady, maybe once or twice fan might kick on. But I don't know why, they always seem to put them in for a while we had several company, I won't mention their name, was putting them right underneath the bed deck, next to the water heater. So we relocated a bunch of those towards the kitchen, underneath the refrigerator, underneath somewhere not as noticeable. Yeah.
How many amps do they put out per capacity?
Oh, they can put out a ton. This one here, what is this now?
I think that's a 60.
This is a 60 amp.
They go up, I think the biggest we have.
Yeah, 60 to 80. Yeah.
Plug your unit, your trailer, or whatever, into a 110 power source. How's that function convert?
If I plug it into a 110 power source, how does it?
Does the converter still work?
Well, that's the only reason the converter does work is because you're plugged in. That converter takes the 110, turns it to 12 volt.
Yeah, so you're say you plug your trailer into a 20 amp circuit instead of a 30 amp circuit, does it still function?
Still functions the same. His question is a 20 amp circuit to a 30 amp. Do we have a 20 amp little plug over there? This is a 30.
So a 20 amp circuit will maintain your batteries?
A 20. It all depends on how good your 20 amp circuit is at your house and how far away it is. A 20 amp circuit is the plug you have in your house to plug everything into. It's a little tiny circuit. Depending on how high this amps up, to charge your batteries, it can. I've ran a 20 amp circuit on a small trailer close enough to my shop. I've been able to do that. The problem is if this pulls up heavy amps, you're going to pop your 20 amp breaker. And we get a lot of people that come in and they say, well, I used to do it in my old house, but now I can't. Well, then you ask him and he's like, well, I went down to Jerry's and I bought 400 feet of extension cord and I got it plugged in the shop and around on the other side of the house. Well, that length of extension cord pulls heavy amperage. And usually you can go out there and feel the extension cord and it's warm. And that warmth is heavy amperage being pulled through that. So high resistance. So the best thing to do if you're going to buy an RV and store it at your house, if there's any possible way, have an electrician come out and put a minimum of a 30 amp service. Do not let your buddy that will do it for a 6-pack do it. Don't trust Uncle Jimmy. If they're not an electrician, don't have them do it. And if it's an electrician, you have to let him know what you're using it for. Because there's a difference in single phase and dual phase electricity. And if you plug your 50 amp coach into a single phase plug, like your welder, your dryer, your oven, it's going to shoot 120 volts down both. It's going to shoot 240 volts right down through your short cord, and then you're going to be seeing us and probably your insurance company. Most people come in and they say, oh, whatever it did, I'll just cover it. Then we give them an estimate and they're like, whoa, I probably need to get State Farm on the phone. Because it's expensive when it eats up every 12 volt control board, your air conditioners, your TVs, microwave, blows converters. It can be thousands and thousands of dollars. So make sure the right person gets that electricity to it.
That's where that surge guard comes in.
Yeah, well, yeah, but we have surge guards Dan will talk about, 110 protectors for gray outs and high voltages, but the best thing to do is hire the right person for the job. Okay, any more questions on converters, inverters, how it comes, where it goes? Yeah?
When I got the trailer, I was told that I had an inverter.
An inverter?
And what I'm hearing here, I probably had a converter in that when I am not plugged in, I can run my lights, but I can't run the microwave or anything off the plug-in. Is that accurate?
We would have to look at it. What year is it?
2018.
2018, and what's the model? I mean, what is it, a Jayco SLX is probably not going to have an inverter. Now, we do have people that come in and say, I want an inverter, but I just want one to run the TV and a single site inverter is what we call it, for the TV and DVD player, just for nighttime. I don't need to cook a Hot Pocket and I don't have a CPAP machine. They do sell littler, do we even have little inverters here, 1,000, 1,500s? They do sell little inverters. You can buy them all over the place. And they will actually just sit behind the TV in a cabinet. We run voltage from your batteries up to the inverter, and then you plug the TV and you unplug it from the wall and plug it in the inverter. It's usually $500–600 to have one installed. And that's what they call a single site, low watt inverter just for televisions. I wouldn't do it on a microwave. We'd have to go to about an 1800, 2000. And then you're going to have two batteries on the front. So you'd be able to invert a microwave for 5, 6, 7 minutes. But then you'd have to charge it up the next day pretty fast. Inverters pull a lot of 12 volt power. We have people come in and they've talked to somebody down in Arizona around a campfire, and they come in and see Dan and say, yeah, I want this great big inverter. And the first thing he says is, okay, so where are we putting the extra batteries? And they're like, well, he never said nothing about that. Well, you have to have a fuel tank for that big engine. And that battery is your fuel tank for your inverter. And then the next thing he's going to say is, if you dry camp a lot, how are you going to charge that great big fuel tank? because you can't run your engine all day. And maybe you don't want to run your generator for 8 hours. Because theoretically, if you're going to start your generator, you should never run it less than 4 hours. If you get your batteries to the point you think they're low enough they need voltage, start it for 4 hours and walk away. That's what it's going to truly take or more to charge those batteries. So then he says, sir, your $2,500 inverter now is turned into $45 with the extra batteries. Oh, and by the way, in order to fill that many batteries dry camping, we need to put 400 or 500 watts of solar panels on the roof. And then he says, so since you've talked to that guy down there, why don't you tell me what you want to do with this? And usually that's when the customer says, well, I just want to watch TV. Or, you know, I just need it for my CPAP machine. That's all I need it for. Well, then we talk them into a CPAP inverter, which we sell, which is actually an inverter that goes next to the bed. We wire it in. What are they, $600–700 installed? So this guy down at the campfires got this guy all wound up for this big fancy inverter, not realizing that's not really what he needed.
So if the cheaper rate would be a generator, you want to run a microwave, just
Plug the generator in. But depending on where you are, you can't run generators all the time. A lot of people are late nighters and want to watch TV or run their satellite. And you can't do that unless you're running the generator or plugged in. And if you can't do either, you're sitting there reading a book, which is fine by me. I read a lot.
I heard the new overcome that you can bring your clothes dryer or off like
The
new, not cool, but
yeah, I haven't seen an inverter that big yet.
well, that's what they're advertising.
Huh. Well, they must be LED dryers then, because that's the worst thing you could run off of an inverter is a heating element. Coffee pot, hair dryer, anything like that. Anything that's going to generate heat is going to pull those batteries down so fast. And sometimes what they'll do is they'll fib to you a little bit. I don't know if you know this or not, but those flyers that show you all the cool stuff, yeah, they don't really get into the heart of what it's doing.
Well, this is a voice, not a reader.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, it's a salesman. But
I know, and salesmen never lie.
But if, yeah, even if you're plugged into shore power, you know, when you have your coffee pot hooked in there, boy, when it kicks on to make coffee,
Oh, yeah.
you rub a lot, then it shifts over to the, you know, the more or less idle state, the warmer part, you know.
Yeah.
Keeping your pot warm.
Yeah. We had all electric coaches years ago, and they didn't work real well. They have them again now. They're called all electric coaches, but when they're sold, the people were talked to and told him, yeah, they're all electric. That means you go from one camp spot to another. There's no downtime in between. So years ago, we used to stack 4 inverters together in a bay and run 20, 30 batteries, and used to try all sorts of stuff. But those are mainly for highline coaches that the people have no intention of going to wiki-up fishing, or they want to go from one luxury park to the next. So did that answer any of your questions? Okay. I get long sometimes. If I do, just shut me down. My wife does.
I was looking at my fifth wheel. We're talking about buying 2 generators and putting them in line. What's he talking about?
2 generators in line. It's real popular nowadays, and I don't like doing it because what's that?
Is it necessary?
Well, if you have 2 generators, what watt? He's talking about putting his generators, running them in parallel. What size are your generators?
I don't have any, so I haven't got them yet.
Okay.
I've got some experience with this. So, and the question is hooking 2 generators together. And I see this a lot, and I support it. As much as I don't like generators, I prefer solar. But the answer is Honda and Yamaha both make 2,000 watt generators that are basically, they call them inverter generators because it's a gasoline engine driving an alternator that it has a built-in inverter. So it's actually 3 components. The the generator powers this little inverter. And the reason they do that is so that when you hook these two generators together, they communicate with each other to match frequency and load. So when you hook up your Honda 2000 or your Yamaha 2000 to the Yamaha 2000 companion, you hook the connector up, they communicate. You pull the starter, you start them up, they equalize. Now, what one does, the other one does. So if you plug into a 30 amp system, both of these together will combine their output. It's easier for a person to handle a 50-pound generator than it is a 130-pound generator, and they work well together. And these Hondas and Yamahas are extremely efficient. You can run quite a bit of time on a small amount of gas. They're very quiet. If you compare a portable to a built-in Onan, the Onan is horrible at fuel economy. They're very inefficient. And the Yamahas and Hondas are extremely efficient. So there's a lot of benefits to do it. The big downside, though, is if you talk to the police, they'll tell you the #1 theft item on Craigslist is a Honda or Yamaha generator. You have to be very careful. Now, both of them put a steel strap in the handle. If this was the generator and it had a plastic handle on it, there's actually a steel strap in here. So if you had a bike cable around it and a kid came up with a hatchet and cut this, he would end up looking at the strap, and it's a carbon steel strap, and he's not going to cut that strap, and he's going to run off. They've done that because it is such a high theft item. So they're very efficient, they're very quiet, and they do provide good power. They have economy modes where they will idle down and they will allow the inverter to make a small amount of current. And then if your load steps up, then their RPM comes up. And they're 4 or 5 times as efficient as a built-in generator. They're very good.
What's the purpose of putting it in line though?
Well, if you had a 2,000 watt generator, that's actually a 1,600 watt continuous output generator, and that's not big enough to run the microwave or the air conditioner. If you put two of them together, now you've got 33 amps. You can run a 30 amp system. You can run the air conditioner. You can run the refrigerator, and you can do them both. There's a 3,000 or 4,000 watt generators can be 130 to 150 pounds. And I'm starting to have trouble lifting 150 pounds. So it would be easier for me to carry 2 50-pound suitcases than a 150-pound generator. So that's why they do it, because you put them together, you can run anything in the coach.
Well, you're talking about those two matching each other's frequency.
Yes.
Most people don't know that when their generator sits idle for 60 days, the frequency will change on it. And so when they start it up, they set a new frequency. Do they still match frequencies?
Well, they're electronic. You have an engine driving an alternator, driving an inverter. And so the inverter will draw current according to what it sees for potential demand. And so they communicate with each other, and they have very much exactly the same amount of current putting out. That's the only way this would work. Otherwise, you'd have if you had two regular generators, the frequencies and everything would not match, and you'd have all sorts of problems. They just don't work because you get so much interference between the two generators.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
That was good.
Okay. Well, I'm going to jump into my battery then, or unless.
Yeah.
Okay. I wanted to mention one thing that I have. He and I both have kind of soapbox issues. We like to make sure people really understand. And it was brought up, and he mentioned very rightly that there is no RV in America that functions and is designed to operate off a 220. And I can say that quite easily because it's a federal law. And the reason that it is a very important thing is I have straight hair and I'm Irish, I'm not Indian. If I plugged my coach into 220 and happened to have a ground fault problem, it wouldn't just curl my hair. 220 locks up your nervous system so you can't function and you can't let go of that handle. A sad story. A long time ago, this guy came in with his fifth wheel and he was complaining about a couple things, and he said, oh, by the way, we chain our dog to the assist handle going in, and if it's wet, he just stands there and shivers and yaps. And what happened with this poor dog is the neutral was broken, and he had a metal chain going from a metal handle through the skin of the coach down to this poor little dog standing in the mud, and every time he twitched, it would make 110 contact through him. And it was a sad thing. So the moral of the story is it's very important to make sure that you have the right kind of power in your coach. There is no such thing as 220. We have a lot of people, like he said, have their buddy come over and wire it, or they plug it into the welding outlet. And what happens is, besides curling your hair and making you have a bad day, it goes up through the ground wire in your 110 system. So your TV has 3 prongs. It has a neutral, ground, and a positive. Well, now you've got 110 going in this way, and you've got 110 going in the output, and it doesn't matter if it's plugged in, it could be turned off. There's going to be 110 coming up the wrong way, and it fries everything inside that component. And we get people, last one I had, he went up to a friend's house and plugged in, and he had just bought the coach from us, and calls up, and this doesn't work and that doesn't work, and we get him down here. He finally admits that he had plugged into his friend's house, and everything in his coach, brand new coach, was fried, and it was almost $20,000. So we have to be very careful with that. Anyway, so much for my soapbox. One comment, when we're talking about the converter, and Dave said you could actually unhook the battery from the converter. That's true, but what happens, and these are called, in the early days, they were called power supplies. They weren't called converters. They were designed to be standalone, but then they realized really rapidly back in the early 80s that the battery acted as a capacitor, so that the converter may put out 12.5 volts or so, but if you put a battery with it, now it'll put about 13.5 to 14 volts, and it's much cleaner power. So even if you were in a bad situation, and you'd lost your batteries for whatever reason, the converter would operate most of your systems. On the newer coaches, though, they will not operate the slide rooms and things like that because they don't put out enough potential. Slide rooms need to see 13.5 volts, between 12.5 and 13.5, and a converter without a battery as a capacitor just won't do it. So it's very important. That leads me right into my little talk, which is about the 12-volt battery systems that are the heart of every RV. Even if you had a $1 million King Air. King Airs come with 2 2800-watt inverters, 16 AGM batteries, and they are an all-electric coach. And they're pretty amazing, but you have to start with the battery. There are several types of batteries. The two that we care about, whether you have a pickup and a fifth wheel, or you've got a Class A or a Class C or a Micro Mini, whatever, they all have 2 types of batteries. One is a starting battery, and starting batteries have a lot of plates. They're very thin, so you have high surface area. They can discharge a lot of current in a very short period of time. They also recharge very rapidly. The downside is the plates are stamped together, and the frame is actually usually cardboard. If you discharge a starter battery more than about 15%, you start losing enough lead off of that plate so it can never be recharged again. So if you leave the lights on in your truck and you come out the next morning, that sucker's dead, you've probably taken 3/4 of the life out of that truck. That battery it'll never be the same, because regular starting batteries cannot stand being deep discharged. On the other hand, we have deep cycle batteries that are intended for that specifically. There are much fewer plates, about 1/5 as many plates, but they're kind of like me. They're a little bit robust, a little chubby. These fat plates don't have a lot of surface area, so they don't discharge rapidly, but they can discharge over a long period of time. And the frame of the plate is a material, it's aluminum and something else. It's light, but it's strong, and the lead will bond to it and replate rapidly. So if you accidentally allow your batteries to go down below the minimum, they will be able to recharge themselves and recover almost 100%. A fully charged battery, standing by itself, 12-volt battery, what is the potential of that battery? What's the voltage?
12.6.
12.6. Okay, according to the RV industry, what is the voltage of a battery at the low end, at the discharge end? What is what we would call a dead battery?
11.
How much?
11.
11. Well, it's a 12-volt battery. So you're saying that a fully charged battery is 12.5 and a fully discharged battery is 11.4 to 11.6. Thank you. I'm using you.
Yeah.
Hey, you got to pay for this food somehow. He's been to more of these than anybody. I remember him being here 4 or 5 years ago. But anyway, yeah, a dead battery is actually around 12 or 11.6.
6 to 8.
11.6 to 11.8. So there's a very fine line there. A discharged battery will still operate the lights, but most of your appliances, like your refrigerator, your slide room, your jacks and that, they require the voltage at the high end. They require, and that's why we tell people, if you're going to be running your slide rooms, you either have to have the generator running or you've got to have it plugged into 110, because that's the only way you're going to get more than 12.5 towards 13 volts. These slide rooms, the motors are controlled by a printed circuit board that has basically a Zener diode in it that monitors the amount of amperage that's going to that motor. Ohm's law tells you that if your potential is high, your amp load's going to be low. So they set those controls so that there's about 13 volts going into that motor, then that amp load's going to be, let's say, 11. Let's say that you're trying to run this room in and the battery is like 11 volts. Well, Ohm's law is going to tell you now that 11 volts is going to take 19 or 20 amps. Well, it's not. It's going to throw the switch way below that amp rating. So if your batteries are low, that room's going to go, and then you wait a while, and it's not going to work as well. So we need to make sure that the more sensitive appliances, the ones that take the large amount of current, are plugged in or the generator's running. Now that we've discussed the two different types, deep cycle and starting, there are several different kinds of deep cycle batteries. The one that's been around since the Egyptians used to make these flooded cell batteries. They used to use citric acid and lead in a pot. That's basically what these are. These are lead plate, sulfuric acid. The reaction is lead sulfur to lead sulfate and water, which brings up. A fully charged battery has sulfuric acid that freezes at, I think, 64 degrees below zero. A dead battery is going to have lead sulfate crystals and water freezes at 32 degrees. So if you are storing your camper or your rig somewhere where it freezes, you need to make sure that your batteries are fully charged. Otherwise, they'll swell up and they'll destroy themselves, they'll freeze. So if it's cold, make sure your batteries are fully charged. Okay, back to different types of deep cycles. The original deep cycle was a 6-volt golf cart, what we call it today. They're taller, and they have a settlement chamber in the bottom so that if there's junk in the water, it settles out and they don't short out. Then it's a very good design. They're very efficient. They're a little more efficient than the 12-volt. And so if you're in a situation where you run an inverter, or if you have high demand, you have an apnea machine and you need to rely on your batteries, we highly recommend the 6-volt batteries over the 12-volt. They will duty cycle about twice as many times, so they'll last about twice as long. They give you actually better capacity over the long run, and they're higher maintenance, but they're just a better performing battery. And then the very best one, well, I can't say that. The step up in our industry, the very best one is what we call the AGM, the absorbed glass mat battery. What they do is they take a fiberglass pouch, they put a lead plate in it, impregnate it with sulfuric acid and a gel, and then they just scrunch them all together and they seal it up so that these batteries, you don't maintain them, they can't leak, they will function just as good upside down. You can't, the electricity doesn't leak out of them. These batteries need to be maintained quite a bit. On a deep cycle, typically every 6 to 8 weeks. An AGM, there's nothing you can do to it except for make sure it's kind of clean, and they last 3 to 4 times as long. They don't get memories. It's just a very, very good battery. As in almost any battery, what you're paying for is lead. So if you pick up a battery and it doesn't weigh very much, don't buy it. Because the good batteries weigh, this battery weighs almost 80 pounds. And what you're buying is lead. There are, my last comment is there are, whatever those batteries are that here in your foam.
Batteries.
Yeah.
Yeah, the nickel, not even the nickel. Hey, you got me all messed up too.
Lithium, thank you.
Thanks.
You can have more lunch.
We brought you for something.
Yeah. Anyway, we once in a while somebody will say, well, what about those lithium-ion batteries? Well, what about them? Well, do you sell them? Well, we'd like to because they're $1,600 a battery, but nobody in their right mind buys them. Oh. Now, they're a lithium-ion battery the same size as this battery. Doesn't have quite the capacity. This is rated at 90 amp hours. A lithium-ion this size would be about 80, and they weigh about half as much, but they last forever. So I guess, and you know, if you're planning on the world coming to end tomorrow, that would be the one to have. But I don't think we've maybe sold more than a couple of them that I never really.
Well, we even have some manufacturers that started putting them in their B class, and they're starting to take them back out. They just haven't. Not quite there yet.
Don't know that. I think it's mostly monetary, and we thought that, we thought that they thought that it would be, you know, people would really be excited about it, but
yeah, the price tag though.
yeah.
Yeah, they got excited about the price, didn't they?
Yeah, really.
Okay.
Places like Guaranty don't make any money, see, so they can go back to the old battery.
Yeah.
Any questions about batteries before I turn it back over to this young man? I got you all asleep.
It's going to be both of us on this one, because this is where you go into the towing and all that.
Oh.
But the next part we usually go over is when you're towing your trailer. How do your batteries charge when you're towing or driving? There's only 2 ways. And that's with your generator or your charging system off your engine. So we get people that call all the time, and they're driving through Vegas dying because it's 130 degrees, and the first thing they say is, "Can I drive with my generator on?" Well, heck yeah, get that baby fired up. Get it fired up, turn your air conditioners on. You can drive with all that going down the road. Get it back to 68 in there. Get it cold enough to hang meat if you want. But you can run your generator while driving. He'll go over electromotive force with you. This is his, he's way more scientific than I am. I know which direction it goes. He has all these big words. Apparently they taught those in his college. So, like I say, when you're towing or driving, you want to make sure you're driving. We get people that will call and say, "My batteries were dead this morning when I got up, but we drove clear to the lake, and last night they died again." Well, how far was the lake? Well, it's a whole hour and 15 minutes away. Hour and 15 minutes of driving isn't going to bring up a dead battery. So generators, solar panels, there's all sorts of ways. If you're going to dry camp or store your unit without it being plugged in, you got to figure out another way to get those tanks filled, your batteries.
Well, the thing it is, too, you got your RPM, you got to be up higher too.
Well, if you're driving, your RPMs are high enough.
Oh yeah, they're up there. But
Yeah.
I mean, no.
Yeah, and an alternator at idle, an alternator at idle doesn't help anything. That's why whenever Grandpa had you jump the tractor, he'd always tell you to put your foot in it a little bit, bring the RPMs up. As soon as the RPMs come up, then it starts putting out the electromotive force and charging the battery. So, you want to go over alternators, or did I cover it?
No, you're doing great. Unless everybody here wants to know all about electromotive force. No, see? So you keep going.
Any questions on charging, as far as how to charge it, what to charge? Boy, this is an easy one. Yeah?
What would be the best way to have something running at night so that you can recharge your cell phones and maybe a clock?
As far as recharging cell phones and clocks just at night. Well, again, if you're talking about a 110 receptacle, it would have to be inverted. Then you'd have to install, a lot of phones will go off 12 volt. You could just install, a lot of the new trailers out there have hookups just for phones, plugging ports in them. You can buy those and have them installed at the back of a dinette. As far as a 110 alarm clock, I wouldn't install an inverter or anything just for that. The biggest thing we have right now are people that buy trailers and they need the CPAP machines. And Zamp Industries out of Bend makes a little inverter that's mounted right on the wall next to the bed. We wire it in right straight from the batteries, and it's got a little plug, and it's made just for a CPAP machine. And like I say, I think depending on how far we have to go, it's $600, $700, $800 installed.
The CPAP inverter is $750.
Oh, okay.
And then we've got to have the fuse and the wire, and it's got to be at least number 4 wire.
Okay, so I lied to you. I'm practicing to be a salesman. Salesmen are going to see this later, and they're going to be like, "You quit picking on us." They're fun to pick on.
Would you go through that CPAP again for
As far as what part of it, how
they install it?
they just mount it on the wall. The inverter, the 110 receptacle, everything's built in one little box. All we have to do is run 12 volts to it. And it's meant just for a CPAP. You could probably get away with, an alarm clock doesn't take anything. So you could use it for an alarm clock and a CPAP. Yes?
I have a Class C, and in the house, there's a toggle switch, and it's store on one side and use on the other side, that switch. And my question is the engine battery, does it charge the house battery when you're on store, when you're driving, when you're on store?
It depends on what system. Her question is, she has the storage button. A lot of RVs, a lot of motorized RVs and a little bit higher line fifth wheels have store mode, or on and off for your batteries, battery disconnect. The battery disconnect was only intended for fueling. The main reason for that switch is when you get out to go get gas or propane, you turn that to store, and it turns off all the 12 volts so that you don't have any intermittent sparks, your furnace doesn't light. The guy putting propane in your fifth wheel or your trailer or motorhome, he gets excited when he's putting propane in it and your water heater starts clicking and he hears a flame going. So that stops all that. And then when you put it back to use, it puts you right back to where you started when you left the unit. They are also, for if you're going to store it without being plugged in, you can turn it to store, and it shuts off most of the, you're still going to have memories, you're still going to have engine, transmission memories, a clock, or radio. It's not going to shut it off 100%. But if you're not going to store it plugged in, you put it to store. So as for now, what her main question was, I wanted to explain what the button was for. When she's driving, does it charge the batteries? Usually, we would have to check. Usually that does not disconnect anything chassis related through the motorhome. Did that kind of answer? Okay. Now that brings us to bidirectional relays. I'm on it today. I'm getting dry even. So bidirectional relays, also called birds. Bidirectional isolator relay delays. Some of the manufacturers have to where when you plug in, when your house batteries come up to full charge, as soon as it has a little brain in it. And it's also wired over to your chassis batteries. When it notices your chassis battery drop below a certain voltage and your house batteries are up, it will actually click over and use your generator, your converter, whatever you're using, to charge your house batteries to charge your chassis battery back up. So that you never have to worry about, especially if you go somewhere, stay in Arizona for 4 months, you don't have to start it every 2 days to get your chassis battery up. It keeps it topped off. Then just the other way around, most of them since the beginning of time, when you start the engine, it charges the house and chassis. There's bidirectionals, and then there's, here I go again, I'm losing it today. What was the one they put on the firewall to charge when you're driving to the house? Not a bidirectional, just an isolator. It's just an isolator. It said house and chassis. I'm going to have to soon. We paid him. Did you see the food? So Winnebago's real good on having that. Is it Winnebago? No. Newmar. And some of the Winnebagos. Most of the other lines do not have bidirectionals in them.
I used one of those when I had my slide-in camper. That's what I used.
Yep.
Had two batteries, one for camper and one for the truck.
Yeah, works real well.
Like you're just saying, when one's lower than the other one, it charges the low one.
Yep. Yep, work great.
Also, when I first started, I used a knife switch. When I got somewhere, I just opened up the knife switch, and that way I was using just extra battery.
Yeah, we got away from the knife valve disconnects. Now they have click-ons and all sorts of cool stuff. Boy. Yeah, and then we probably ought to take a break or else just finish off, because we just basically are going to talk about LED lights. But yeah, talk your heart away. What'd they do with
Well, with that invitation, absolutely. So it's not something we typically talk about too much in this seminar, but solar is one of my favorite topics. I believe in it very much. If you do dry camping or even for maintenance, it's a very good technology. And we're talking about the bidirectional relay, basically, and I like how Newmar does it. We get this question all the time. You retire, you go down to Arizona somewhere, and you plop your backside down in a chair and you sit there all winter. Side note, I have this one customer I've had for many years, love the old guy. And he gets down there in the fall and he takes a picture of this rock, which is outside of where he parks his fifth wheel. And he's got this picture. His chair is about a foot from this huge rock, which is 3-4 feet tall. And he sends me these pictures of, in the morning he's got this big glass of a martini. And through the morning it goes down and down and down. And so he sends me these pictures of his rock. But that's what he does. He sits there and enjoys his martinis in the sun.
It's the life.
Yeah, but the problem is guys, a lot of times they have to get up and get another martini. But the other problem is if they don't move their coach every couple weeks, then it's hard to start. Because when you're plugged into 110, it charges the coach batteries, but unless you have a bidirectional relay, it doesn't do anything to charge the chassis. So there's ways to do that. A bidirectional relay is the most convenient, but you can run a wire from the hot post of your chassis to the hot post of your coach, and if you don't forget it, leave it. The other thing is, because I like solar so much, we've been dealing with ZAMP Industries in Bend for a long time. And I've been in it, and I know Jim Bozamp personally. And I got him finally a few years ago to put on the charge control panel on a solar panel. There's one now that offers this bidirectional relay. So if you get specifically a solar panel kit and you want to have it charge your chassis, what this controller does is it brings up your coach batteries from overnight use, and once they're up to pretty much a full charge, usually about, when it sees about 12.8 to 13.0, it will then turn on this relay and start charging your chassis battery. It won't be much, but it won't need much. But 6 months later, when you finally pull up anchor and get that old beast headed home, your engine will fire right up because it's been maintained the whole time. Solar is a very personal thing. What they need in solar is not going to be what they need or what he wants. So if you want to talk solar, you need to find somebody that really understands it, because like he was saying earlier, in the 90s, we used to get people that we would convert buses and we would just stack them up. But then we learned, you know, everybody has different needs, and inverter is a very good way to do it if you want to do it, but everybody has different needs, different configurations. There's no one size fits all. And the thing with solar, I'm probably going overboard here, but it's really fascinating. They have stacked of these cells, and each cell is slightly different. And one reacts to blue light, one reacts to green light. And the three primary colors are red, blue, green. Red is heat, infrared, and it doesn't work well with solar. But the old panels, all they could do was blue light. The new stuff does blue and green. So a few years ago, people were saying, oh yeah, the panels are more efficient. Well, they are now, because they can react to both colors, primary colors, and they do a very good job. We go with ZAMP. Number one, I'm pro-American. Number two, ZAMP builds their panels right over here in Bend, Oregon. So if you bought a 160 watt panel from us, it was made in Bend, Oregon. And they're competitive price-wise with Al-Qaeda or, you know, any of the Chinese stuff.
How big is that one you got right there?
Oh, I think this is either a 40 or a 60. Yeah. So it's more than I really needed to say, but I wanted to talk about it a little bit.
A question on that. So if they install the solar, do they run it through the same circuit panel, or does it more direct wire to where you need it?
Yeah, somebody that knows what they're doing, there's two issues. Number one, the wire, you know, guys come in and say, well, I got a solar panel up on the air conditioner. No, they don't. They've got this stupid little thing and it does nothing. And so the answer is it goes directly to your charge controller, from your charge controller directly to your batteries. It does not go through battery disconnect. It's a straight line.
Or back to the refrigerator.
refrigerator. We see a lot of...
We see a lot of shops install these, and they do it cheaply to save time. And we see a lot of them installed. They just cut into some 12-volt wires they know that go to the fuse panel and tap in there because they figure, well, it'll go backwards. Well, the problem is they've tied 10-gauge wire into 16-gauge wire, and then you start talking about heat and shorting, and you go from panel to battery with your controller in the middle.
And you've got to have a charge controller. Unfortunately, they're a little inefficient, but not too bad, about 5%. But these panels, and there is a difference between the one you put on your house and the one on your RV, but these panels put about 19 volts. And that's a little bit much for the battery. So they go through a charge controller, and once the potential gets up to about 14, they shut off. Back electromotive force, the resistance in the battery, is such that if you were trying to get it to 12.6 or 12.8, you've got to have at least, is the battery's pushing back, you've got to be able to push on it with more than that. And so charge controllers are set up at about 1 volt above the top potential of that battery. So they're going to shut down at 13.8 to 14. But they won't allow it to destroy the battery. If you had a big array and you were putting 19.5 volts into a few batteries, you can fry those things pretty fast. So, yeah.
Can you use a system of these in place of a generator? So when power goes down, you can knock these things out, set them up, and not worry about firing that noise up.
You can go have another round of fruit. Thank you for that. Yes, the question is, can you use a solar inverter system in lieu of a generator? Absolutely. And a lot of times people will come to me and they've got a fifth wheel or something like that that did not come with a generator. And I lay it out and I say, okay, what do you want to do? We want to run the microwave and the TV and charge the phones and, you know, the little stuff. Yeah, we can put a 2,000 watt inverter in there. We can put a few batteries in there. We can put a little bit of solar on there. And the solar depends on how many days you're going to plant yourself in that dry camping situation. You may be there for 3 days, which means you just need a few more batteries. You may be there for 3 weeks, which means you need a snoot load of solar panels. We lay that out. We give you a price. And then we say, okay, now if we were to put a 4 kW Onan generator in there, that's going to be $5,600 installed. And we're down at around $4,500. And they go, really? When can we do it? Because if you compare apples to apples, a solar array with an inverter and batteries will do anything a generator can do except run the air conditioner. We can get inverters that will run the air conditioner, but you've got to have a trailer behind your coach to put all the 32 batteries in it. And we've done this. There are people that have had big motorhomes that we've had huge systems. Well, you've got to have a huge array of solar panels. It's just basic math. It's a 160 watt panel will put out about 9 amps per hour, but that's good light. That's not half light like today. So you've got to overkill your solar so that on a bad day, you can still have reasonable power and you're not just getting behind. So there's a lot into it. You had a question?
Yeah, the newer fillers say solar ready.
Yeah.
Plug.
So.
What does that actually mean and what is it running?
Okay.
Can I do this one?
Oh yeah, I'm sorry.
Well, just because I got to break in, I'm falling asleep. Solar ready, all it means is they've put 2 wires from the battery to that plug on the ceiling. Or if it's on the outside,
It's on the top.
yeah, that's all it is. And that's for, they sell them, I call them a suitcase solar panel. They fold open.
Can I plug that into that and it will maintain my batteries?
Yes.
Pretty much. And it
Yeah.
won't run lights or anything else.
Well, as long as it's maintaining.
But it'll draw off battery.
Correct.
Whatever I need to.
So that plug goes right directly to the battery?
Yep.
Is there a
That
controller in that?
on the back of it, that one, yes, it has a controller built in. The suitcase one does. What you don't want to do is, he was saying the number one thing that was stolen was generators. The number two thing stolen are suitcase solar panels.
I just wanted to say real quick, the number 2 item on the Craigslist for the hot sheet, number 1 is the Honda and Yamaha generators. Number 2 is portable solar panels. And they're getting to the point where people are stealing solar panels off of, you know, if you have a post with solar panels at your cabin, not anymore. They're getting to where they really are becoming a high theft item. So if you have portable and you're over at the coast and you just say, hey, let's go for a couple-hour hike, 10 minutes later, you lost your solar. It's gotten pretty bad. So portable is, yeah.
The best thing to do is just have one mounted on the ceiling, or excuse me, on the roof. Yeah, and remember that when you go look at the charge rate at 11 o'clock at night, don't call me the next day and tell me they're not charging. I almost got fired from a job because I had a lady call screaming because her solar panels weren't charging all night long. And I told her, well, as soon as they make lunar panels, I will let you know. Apparently she didn't think it was funny. I thought it was hilarious. Apparently my boss thought it was somewhat funny because I still had a job. But okay, the last part of this is basically your usage. If you're going to go dry camping, remember what you have on the front is your batteries, and that's it, unless you have a generator. It's okay to have candles, and it's okay to pretend like you're in college again and light a candle and eat dinner and look at each other across the table and play cards with a LED little battery light. Save those for when you need it. Yep.
So if you go dry camping, a lot of these generators have a charging circuit in them where you can hook the jumper right to the batteries, charge batteries.
Mm-hmm.
Can you do both at the same time?
If you had 2 different generators. He wants to charge through the shore cord and plug in and put jumpers right to the batteries. You can, there's really no reason to. Your converter is going to charge at a fast enough rate that if it needs to be charged double, it'll amp up. So take care of your usage, and remember, the next morning after it's 28 degrees up there and you're fishing at Odell Lake, that furnace is going to take the heaviest amount of voltage out of your batteries because it has 2 flywheels in there, an intake and an exhaust flywheel. Looks like that little thing your hamster used to run on. It's got to spin those. It has to hold open a gas valve. I mean, there's a pretty good motor in there. So when you run that furnace all night long, the next day you're going to need to start that generator and run it 6 or 8 hours. Something to get those batteries charged up because you're not going to make it through a second night. Now, the big thing you can do, this is mainly if you dry camp, LED lights. Lights take a lot. And believe it or not, I'm just as bad as anybody. I'll flip on a light to do this or that and realize the light I turned on really didn't help me at all. LED lights are great. They're starting to come down in price. This whole myth that they last 1,000,000 years, you never have to replace them, is a lie. I think it's the people selling them. There we go to sales again. That they will go out here and there. Anything man-made, you're going to have a percentage of failure on. If you're going to do LED lights, buy one of the 3, there's 2 or 3 colors. They don't run on lumens, they run on, I forgot the name of it, but when you're looking at it, you'll see. They have like a soft white and a cool white and a bright white. Buy one of each and see which one you like. The bright white is too bright. Maybe one in the restroom because you're not going to be in there, you, I don't know, need a lot of light to shave, whatever. But your reading lights, you want cool white, soft white. I ran out 12 years ago when these all came out and spent 30 bucks a bulb and changed every one in my fifth wheel, which was about 2,000 bucks worth, to bright white. And when you turn the lights on in there, it hurt your eyes. It was that bright. So bright white's fine in a closet or here, maybe in a compartment, but take 2 or 3 and see which one works for you before you spend the money, because they are different.
Do they interchange with different?
Any RV bulb out there, there's an LED bulb that'll fit.
No, I mean, as far as LEDs and the regular 12 volt, do they intermix? Can you run half your coat or trailer?
Yeah, you can.
LEDs and the other half?
Yep, you can run whatever you want. Even the thin lights that go in the older style thin lights that go in the ceilings, we have LED kits for those now, where we take all the bulbs out and all the ballast and everything out and just put LED in and wire them direct. Yep, they're over here somewhere. But just be cautious on your usage. And if you bring the grandkids, your usage is going to double. It just automatically will.
So realistically, if you're dry camping, you should run your generator each day.
4 or 5 hours a day.
Okay.
Generators are cheap in the long run. Especially if you have a built-in, like an Onan generator or something like that. Those things are meant to run hundreds of thousands of hours as long as you maintain them. They have generators. There's a place called, I had a technician that worked for me that was a generator tech at a place, I think it was called Waterfall, somewhere in California up in a mountain. And they had 15 Onan generators that were 8,000 kilowatts each. And they had had 4 of those generators for, I think he said 12 years, and they had never shut off. They had never had a minute downtime. They actually sumped the oil in and out while they were running to do oil changes. And that's a lot of hours you added up. I mean, they're meant to run. Usually most generators we have come in that people say, it's not running right. Well, how many times did you run it last year? Oh, am I supposed to run it? It's like that lawnmower you leave all winter sitting in the shed. It won't start up next spring. Run it, start it, run it for 2 or 3 hours, even if you don't need to run it. Get that fuel going through it, the propane going through it, diesel, whatever it is. Any more questions on electricity, solar panels, inverters, converters, bidirectionals? Surge guard, do you want to talk about your surge guard?
So years ago when he and I first started doing this, we used to kind of get into it once in a while, and this is one of those areas where we never used to agree. So you pull into a campground in Pennsylvania and you plug into 110, and it's the first vacation you've had in 3 years and you're a long ways from home, and they have these amazing lightning thunderstorms and it rains like a son of a gun, and a guy slips off the road, hits a phone pole, power pole, and 11,000 volts comes up and hits the park, and everybody in there gets lit, and nothing works. So people started using surge protectors so that in the unlikely case that this happened, these are basically a big fuse. And when that 11,000 volts comes up their short cord, it hits this, and this fuse, and the reason it's so expensive is the very good ones, in that 3 or 4 nanoseconds, which is thousandths of a second, in those 3 or 4 thousandths of a second, while that electricity is trying to pass through and fry the fuse, these have capacitors in them to absorb that little bit of electricity that's leaking through, so that as they melt down, nothing gets passed into the coach. If you were to buy a real cheap one for 70 bucks, you look at it, and the barn rating it's like in joules, is the amount of electricity it can absorb while it's frying. is not very much. So that one you would use for something like a tent trailer or a camper. I think they're a waste of money, but these have a much higher rating of their capacity. This one is a 50 amp, and it has a high joule rating, so it'll absorb a lot of current in that 50 amp service while the thing melts down. I used to look at it like, you know, you go to Vegas, you gamble. This thing costs $380 plus install, so it's going to cost 600 bucks. My attitude was, in the very unlikely situation that this happens, that's why we have insurance. Your motor vehicle insurance for your fifth wheel, your trailer, your motorhome will cover this repair, and you probably have like a $500 deductible. So you pay your deductible or you pay for the surge protector. And I was very comfortable in my little world and believed that these were a waste of money. And then this guy came along, and a few years ago he said, yeah, but what if you're back in Pennsylvania? It's the first vacation you've had in 3 years, and you really, really need a vacation. And this happens, and now it takes 3 weeks to get an appointment, 2 more weeks to get it fixed, and you're already back home at work, and now you got to figure out how to get it and then how to pay for it, and it just ruined your vacation. So I got to thinking about that, and this is actually cheap insurance, because you don't know what the guy before you did to the power pole. And I've heard many times, you go into a good park and you plug in, everything fries. You find out the guy before you rewired the post. Now, why they do that, I've heard many rumors or many stories. So you really don't know what you're plugging into sometimes. And so we still see it a little bit. So that's what these do. They save your vacation. And we have these in the portable too, but they're a high theft item because people know what they are and what they do and what they're worth. But the hardwired units aren't quite as much money, take a little bit of installation, but the whole point is they save your vacation, they fry, so your coach electrical does not. They're a good deal. Any questions?
And it got hit by an electrical firm several years ago. And it fried several things in the house, no problem. I had a surge protector on, and the first question the insurance company asked was, did you buy your surge protector from the electric company?
From the who?
The electric company.
Household ones are different.
Because if you don't buy it from the electric company, they can refuse to replace it.
He's talking about residential surge protectors.
Yeah.
They're different than RV.
Yeah.
Are they resettable?
No, they're they're a sacrificial lamb.
They're done.
Yeah, and the manufacturers in the instructions tell you to save the box. So when and if it does fail, even if it's out of warranty, you send it back to them in the box. And if it's under warranty, they will either repair or replace it free. If it's out of warranty, if this is $350, they'll fix it if it's fixable for usually around 100 bucks. So if you buy one, save the box, because that's how they control whatever it is they control.
And then what's going to happen is just like me, you're going to save that box for 10 years,
Yeah.
get tired of saving it, throw it out, and the next week it's going to hit.
Yep.
Even whether you got a newer RV that has a permanently installed one, they're not resettable either.
I don't really think, and I may be a little out of turn here, but I think that they tried it for a couple of years on the energy management systems, but there was an issue in the communications, and I don't think anybody's putting them in anymore.
Yeah, these will, if there's a gray out or a brown out, whatever you want to call it, low voltage, they will shut off and then relatch. But high voltage usually just, they're done.
Any other questions? Have we bored you guys to death? Wow.
Okay. Then I
Okay.
guess everybody enjoy. I saw the sun coming out, now it looks like it's foggy again. So I can't tell. Everybody enjoy your day. Thanks.
I'm sorry?